But let's start the field of dreams with baseball. So I've got our MLB panel here. DraftKings contributor Garion Thorne and RotoWire's Paul Bruno and Erik Halterman. Guys, we've got an 11-game main slate tonight. So let's price check a few positions, shall we? Starting with a pitcher you're targeting who's over 8K. Now there's Tyler Mahle, who you're going to have to pay up for at 10-2, but he's facing the Cubs, who do strike out more than any other team against right-handed pitching. Garion, is that enough to entice you to roster him and pay up a little bit?
It is enticing, I can't lie. But I think I'm going to go a little bit more expensive and just go with Zach Wheeler. There was kind of a perception that Wheeler had been struggling. His 2 starts prior to his last outing hadn't been up to his very lofty standards, which I think has to be a point that's made when you talk about Wheeler struggling. But for July as a whole, he's still pitching as well as he's pitched the entirety of the season. When you look at the advanced stats, it's just that his opponent BABIP is up around 350 and his strand rate is at 64%. So his ERA hasn't looked immaculate the last little bit, but he's got a 1.94 FIP in the month. And he has also been dominant when pitching in Philadelphia so far this season. He's got a 2.21 FIP, a 209 ERA, and a 32% strikeout rate in that span of time. So I'm just banking on the fact that Wheeler has been one of the best pitchers in baseball the whole season. And I think it's really important that when we now talk about the Nationals, one, they've always been a lineup that has been better against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching. But after Trey Turner left last night's game and was placed on the COVID IL, they are basically a one-man show. If Juan Soto doesn't beat Zach Wheeler tonight, no one's beating Zach Wheeler tonight.
All right, Wheeler is one of 3 guys who are over $10,000. Paul, what do you think? You want to pay up for your pitcher?
I can make a case for Lucas Giolito along the same lines. He jumps off the list today for me, priced at $9,800. Look at what a lengthy run he's been on of solid appearances. Considered he's allowed 3 runs or less in 10 of his last 12 starts. He's also on a streak of 15 straight starts of at least 5 innings pitched. So, these days, there's a lot of quick hooks around the major leagues, but they don't apply to him. He's also struck out 136 batters in 119 innings this season. And then I look at the head-to-head record against the opposing batters that he'll face today, and he's limited them to a collective 203 batting average and 271 on base in 182 at-bat sample. So that's fairly significant, too. All these numbers point to me spending some money to pay up to get Lucas Giolito in my lineup this evening. I also like what I've seen out of Tyler McGill, a young guy who's made his debut with the Mets, 2.10 ERA and 33 strikeouts and 30 innings pitched since debuting 6 starts ago. It seems as though opposing hitters have not yet figured him out, and he's going to cost $9,200 against the Braves this evening too. So 2 good picks to me on the board today at the high end.
All right, Erik, what do you think? A pitcher you're targeting who's over 8K?
Yeah, there's really quite a lot. Most of the expensive guys today are guys that I'd be perfectly happy to have in my lineup. But I'm going to elaborate a bit more on Tyler McGill, who I think people probably don't know much about. And he's not as good as most of these other guys, but he should be in fewer lineups, I think, given, again, that he's really not a big name next to the Giolitos of the world. He really was not much of a prospect. I think Fangraphs had him pegged as a probable reliever. He's now 26 years old, just made his major league debut this season, has only made 6 starts. But what he's done in those 6 starts looks like he's the real deal. That 2.10 ERA is better than he deserves, but the ERA estimators tend to have him in the mid-3s, which is perfectly fine for this price range. What he's done so far is combine basically a league average walk rate with 27% strikeout rate, which is meaningfully above league average, and a 48.1% ground ball rate, which is the same thing. Not many pitchers are that far above average in both missing bats and keeping the ball on the ground. In fact, if you set the minimum to 30 innings pitched, which is what he's thrown, only 4 other pitchers have matched or exceeded all 3 of his strikeout, walk, and ground ball rates. And those are some elite names: Corbin Burns, Zach Wheeler, who's been talked about, Clayton Kershaw, and then Patrick Sandoval, who doesn't quite fit in that same category, but is somebody that people really should be taking note of this year too. He's facing an Atlanta lineup that was middle of the pack on the season, and that's with having Ronald Acuna Jr. for most of the year, who they won't have the rest of the way. So it's an easy enough assignment. And again, he really has put the building blocks of a really interesting start to his career in his first 6 starts.
All right, now let's talk about big bats. Need a guy who's over 5K. So Chichi Gonzalez has been a popular stacking target this season. We know that. So you interested in paying up for Shohei Ohtani, who's facing him at home, Paul, at 6,400? He is the most expensive hitter on the slate.
No, I'm going to pivot to Pete Alonso. I've been watching him ever since the home run hitting contest, a lot closer. He's continued to hit bombs and continue a hot streak with 5 homers among 14 hits in his last 10 games played. He also enjoys a platoon advantage against Max Fried, who's been awful on the road this season, pitching to a 6.55 ERA, 3.33 OB opposing batting average. Alonso will cost you $5,200 tonight, but I like that a lot. I also like Jose Abreu, a notorious power hitter who mashes lefties. He's been on point with 18 bombs to date and has 6 extra base knocks in his last 35 at-bats most recently. He faces Chris Bubik, who has allowed opposing batters to rake at a 310 batting average with 13 homers allowed in only 39 innings pitched. That's one of the worst marks in the majors. I see Abreu kicking sand in his face and taking his lunch money in this matchup. He'll cost $5,000. And listen to this. Hot off the press, hockey bit of news. Peter Mrazek is signing with the Maple Leafs today. 3 years, $3.8 million just announced.
I love it. We got a little hockey breaking news in this segment. We know we can
hockey billing. Come on,
always
man.
We can always count on Paul for that. Amazing. Erik, what do you think? An expensive hitter who is over 5K.
Pete Alonso is actually, I think, my top choice as well. I'm not scared of Max Fried. 4.46 ERA on the year. His underlying numbers are maybe a little bit better than that, but he's basically league average strikeout and walk rates. He used to be a high ground ball guy, but he isn't this year. Alonso has his career best strikeout rate this season. He's actually cut it from 25.5 last year to just about 20.5 this season. Career highs in hard hit and barrel rate as well. And he's been crushing the ball since the home run derby, hitting 327 with 5 homers. But another guy, just to get another name in there, who's been crushing it since the home run derby is Juan Soto. I think if you're going to play somebody against a good pitcher, I think it's going to be Juan Soto. He's, of course, facing Zach Wheeler, who's one of the scarier matchups out there, but it's in Philadelphia, one of the league's most hitter-friendly parks. And Soto has also had his swing fixed by the home run derby, 5 homers for him as well in just 10 games, and 11 hits in those 10 games with, of course, 11 walks, because this is Juan Soto. He walks all the time. You're more or less guaranteed a couple trips on base for him most of the time. And I think that should still be true even with Zach Wheeler on the mound. So I'd be happy with either of those guys tonight.
All right, Gary, an expensive hitter that you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, Paul really covered a lot of the guys I was going to talk about, but I'll say one more thing about Jose Abreu, who is $5,000 tonight. Not only does he have a 326 isolated power this season against left-handed pitching, the best part about using Jose Abreu is if you're stacking the White Sox, let's say Jose Abreu is going to hit third tonight, which is usually where he hits against left-handed pitchers. Andrew Vaughn's going to hit second in this lineup. He's $2,800 with a 176 WRC plus against left-handed pitching. And Eloy Jimenez is going to hit cleanup. He just hit a 460-foot bomb in his second game back. And for whatever reason, the DraftKings pricing algorithm was like, hey, let's start Eloy Jimenez at $2,500 and have him work his way up. So he's only $2,800. That will not be the case much longer. So you get Jose Abreu at 5K, but you get the other 2 players in that White Sox stack at less than $3,000. It is the perfect situation to exploit tonight.
Let's switch gears, guys, and talk about the DK Sportsbook. So, Erik, what's your favorite baseball bet tonight?
I like the Reds at minus 115 over the Cubs. The Reds have had the better lineup over the course of the season. They are without Nick Castellanos, of course, but they've been 13th in WRC plus compared to 20th for the Cubs. So meaningful enough gap there. But I think the gap between the pitchers is a larger one. Tyler Mahle, who's been touched on before, I think he's turning into something close to a true frontline starter. 3.92 ERA isn't elite, but again, the park in Cincinnati is one of the most hitter-friendly parks in the league. So you give him a bit of, you forgive him for some of that. The underlying numbers, though, are great. 29.2% strikeout rate. Once you start getting up close to 30, I think you get really excited there. Basically, league average ground ball rate and a few too many walks, but that many strikeouts with no obvious weaknesses is the makings of a frontline starter, which he started showing last year. Had that strikeout rate at 29.9%, which is a full 8 ticks above where he was prior to that point. Last year, though, he walked too many guys and didn't keep the ball on the ground at all. Ground ball rate under 30%. But he's really become a well-rounded, I think, again, frontline starter this year. Zach Davies, on the other hand, is the epitome of a back-end starter. 4.30 ERA seems to be better than he deserves, according to most of the ERA estimators. 15.5% strikeout rate, far too low in the modern era. And it's not like he does anything else great to make up for it. He's walking way too many guys suddenly this year. Typically, he has good walk rates, but this year, just about 12%. It's far too high for a guy who, again, can't strike guys out. And he's not an elite ground ball guy either. That profile can work if you're a sinker baller who has a ground ball rate approaching 60% or something like that, but he's at 44.6%. So really just nothing to get excited about with Davies. That gap between the pitchers is, I think, much larger than a -115 would suggest.
Garion, what about you? Your favorite baseball bet tonight?
I'm going to go with a prop. We already talked about Pete Alonso a little bit and how he is in such a good spot tonight. I'm going to back that up. And his total base prop is set over 1.5 total bases at +110. This is a really good matchup against Max Fried. Fried, as mentioned, has struggled immensely on the road this season. He's got a 6.55 ERA. Opponents have a 4.01 WOBA off of Fried when he's pitching away from Atlanta. And Pete Alonso has hit left-handed pitching like few others in baseball. He has a 374 isolated power within the split, and his 437 expected WOBA is the 6th highest qualified mark in baseball. So I think Alonso can hit a double tonight in one of his plate appearances against Max Fried. I think he goes over that prop.
All right, Paul, take us home. Your favorite baseball bet tonight?
Along with that prop on Alonso to hit the double, I'm going to say he hits one over the fence and he pays off at +250. He's on a hot streak that I mentioned earlier, very favorable platoon matchup that I also hit on earlier on. But I also will be looking to hit the under on total of 9 on the D-backs Rangers game. Why would anybody want to watch that one? It pits two of the most terrible offenses against one another. They're also at the bottom of the league in major league standings for multiple reasons. Basically, they stink. So I'm going to hit the under on that one.